Lost in the immense solitudes of the Pacific, its coral atoll a mere 2 miles in diameter, Clipperton Island seems an inconsequential landfall. Marked by a single volcanic outcrop, its circular rim of land is barely visible at sea level. Ringed by heavy surf, the island offers no shelter to passing ships, only a trap. Yet upon this barren shore, life has seized a foothold. Uncounted birds have made it their nesting ground. Here, hordes of crabs have become the island's most tenacious residents. In this stark world, the crab is both scavenger and king. He serves a simple mandate: survival. Human beings have come and gone, leaving mute evidence of their troubled presence. Living witnesses still echo a past of abandonment and terror and violent death. He had hit us so much. He had beat us so much. Cut off from the sea by geologic upheavals, the lagoon has become a unique laboratory for the study of adaptation. Remote, desolate, Clipperton remains a merciless ground in which each species plays an endlessly changing drama of life and death. To the rich and the restless, the resort hotels of Mexico's Pacific coast offer a languid retreat. Among Manzanillo's pools and bars and boutiques, any tourist can find an easy refuge from stress, quickly forget the world's headache. 670 miles to the southwest, Clipperton Island also is a world apart. Appropriately shaped like a cipher or zero, it offers no luxuries at all. Difficult to visit by sea, Clipperton ordinarily is hazardous to reach by air. To permit ready access for Captain Cousteau and a 3-nation scientific team, a temporary airstrip has been cleared on the Coral Flat, the domain of the imperturbable gannet, or booby. Disembarking from the Canadian seaplane, Cousteau is greeted by colleagues Soumian, Delamotte, Delcouter, and Dr. Pierre Niosa, who has led intermittent studies of Clipperton's geology and life systems. Its lagoon now closed to the sea, the island offers no proper anchorage. Thus, the supply ship must stand well offshore, while tons of material and even men are transferred to land by helicopter airlift. Though the island now boasts 2 small coconut groves sprung from trees planted nearly a century ago, Almost every necessity must be brought to its barren ring of gravel. A generator, food, medical supplies, a small tractor to move scientific equipment. Drums of fuel and even water must be stored for the French, Canadian, and American members of the joint scientific mission. Watched by the local residents, the red-footed boobies and the crabs, the new intruders explore their tiny world. They are not the first. Here have come conquistadors, pirates, and Yankee whalers. About the island's narrow rim is scattered the debris of shipwrecked fishermen, of guano poachers, of military missions which have left supply dumps or even an abandoned French camp. Now French, the island's possession was long contested by Mexico, which in 1908 established a small garrison under Captain Arnaud, accompanied there by his young bride. Barely 6 years later, as World War began and revolution swept Mexico, Arnaud rejected an offer of evacuation by an American ship. Today in Mexico, Arnaud's son, Ramon, and the family maid, Altagracia, then 19, recall the fateful decision. Captain Arnaud didn't wish to abandon his post. I told him the food was running out. The food was running out. The captain's son, Ramon, tells of their 3-year abandonment, of the supply ship that never came. There were 15 deaths. The others also were dying little by little. Then they progressively got worse, and the few medicines there were, well, they ran out. The Mexican garrison long forgotten, the Lighthouse Rock remains a solitary landmark of the survivors' ordeal. The treacherous surf that hemmed them in still maintains its steady assault against the land. Even today, guiding the Zodiac through the breakers, the Cousteau team finds it a difficult passage caused by the island's structure. Like a crown on a submerged volcano, the coral reef extends from shore in a shallow shelf against which the waves break incessantly, usually creating an impossible barrier for small boats. Not until the team is past the surf line, where the island's underwater flanks drop steeply, can Cousteau and his companions, Delamotte, Danfin, and Delcouter, safely enter the sea.
A 100 yards away, Clipperton is a bitter battleground of a few surviving species. Here, dolphins play. Here, a manta ray drifts by, unhurried, the image of lordly self-assurance. Here, the waters swarm with life. Also, the flat coral structures offer limited shelter from predators. An unending procession of marine species swims by. Tropical fish of all kinds, large schools of jacks. Here and there, an occasional trumpet fish. Dense populations of quarrelsome moray eels, sometimes as many as 2 or 3 to a square yard. A school of yellow goatfish routinely swerves aside for the passage of a small shark. Around us, more sharks appear. Hard to approach, they arch their backs in a distinctive movement, warning us to stay away from their mobile, three-dimensional territory. Now in the hundreds, the hammerheads pass overhead in a vast armada. Swimming to the surface in frenzied escape from bigger ones, schools of small fish fall victim to another waiting predator, the boobies. Now the boobies themselves must run an aerial gauntlet of frigates trying to steal their fish. Those which elude the frigates are soon relieved of their catch by the voracious chicks. But even as the chick feeds, another presence waits its turn. The red land crab that will instantly seize any unguarded morsel. It too soon must try to ward off rivals determined to join the feast. But in the circular food chain from sea to air to land, there is yet another link. At Clipperton, the moray eels often patrol the shoreline itself in search of food, sometimes venture surprising distances on land to seize their prey. The circle is closed. The sea, which fed the bird, which fed the crab, has again balanced accounts, taken back its own.
Since its discovery by Spanish conquistadors, approaching visitors have been astonished by Clipperton's vast, clamoring flocks of birds, flying like a banner above the island. The terns and boobies, and in season, the piratical frigates who plunder the others of their catch. By tacit agreement, each species has sharply defined property rights, zones where the terns and boobies make their nests. Though eggs are scattered by the thousands upon the bare coral, each tern unerringly finds its own, so inflexibly programmed in its instinctual actions that not infrequently one will try to hatch a hopelessly damaged egg. The birds may soar, but it is the indigenous land crab that holds the ground. No larger than a man's hand, sensitive to heat, the crabs avoid the sun, digging holes and underground galleries, or seeking refuge under palms, bits of wreckage, or anything which offers even a measure of protection. Heedless of privacy, they form in layers, walls of living creatures. so numerous that it sometimes has been described as a vast vermilion carpet. The crab will eat anything soft or unprotected. Its waking life is a ceaseless quest for food. As sundown approaches, the crabs become active. Intent on making the acquaintance of one crab, Cousteau briefly plays a game of now you see it, now you don't. But quickly the crab decides the moving fingers are something edible. More successful is this foraging crab, which is made off with a booby's egg. Usually laying 2 eggs each year, kept under incessant siege by the crabs, it is said that the booby will sometimes yield 1 egg as tribute, and thus, under a kind of gentleman's agreement, gain immunity for the other. With luck, the booby's egg has broken as it was dragged over the jagged coral. When it does not, the crab itself becomes a kind of surrogate parent, patiently waits for the egg to hatch, then devours the baby chick. Yet from the island's pitiless rule of natural selection, there is no appeal. The weak die, the strong survive. Because a booby's 2 eggs usually hatch several days apart, the firstborn is accordingly stronger, frequently drives out the younger chick under the impartial eye of the mother. Relentless as hunger, the crabs move in. Moved by the plight of the evicted chicks, Jacques Herteau of the Cousteau team decides to try an experiment.
Voyez, c'est terrible, hein? Je vais absolument le chasser. Voilà.
To Cousteau, he explains that he proposes to place the weaker chick, almost certainly doomed to die, in a nest with only 1 unhatched egg, hoping the surrogate mother will adopt the foundling. Finding a suitable nest, Herteau pushes aside the booby parent as he carefully places the chick beside the egg, then awaits the response.
Il a l'air surprise, mais pas agressive. Le petit poussin a envie de se mettre sous cette nouvelle mère.
After considerable hesitation, the booby parent at last accepts its new family member. Snug under its foster mother's feathers, the chick confidently awaits its first meal. At another site, a crab has begun his siege, boldly testing the patience of the parents guarding their nest. Joined by other crabs, it works its way ever closer to the chick and egg, protected by the mother's body. Nervously, the booby hen rises, exposing the chick. Instantly, the crabs dart in to seize the newly hatched victim. But this time, the action does not follow the usual plot. The booby parents counterattack. Even the crab's hard carapace is insufficient defense against the rapid-fire thrusts of the booby's powerful beak. Unerringly, the booby's beak has found the chink in the crab's armor. Its damaged claw the price of the ill-fated attack on the nest. This crab, also badly hurt, simply performs a quick battlefield surgery, amputates its own claw. It will be regenerated in the next several molting cycles. The crab's ravenous appetite makes no finicky distinctions, readily dines on friend or foe. Yet despite his willing cannibalism, the crab observes the usual constraints within a single species, never attacks and kills one of his own kind. In its incessant feeding, the crab has denuded the island of all vegetation except the few established trees. It will ingest anything its claws can tear and carry to the mouth. Yet in this bleak battleground for survival, it also performs a necessary scavenger role. Picked clean by the crabs, the booby's bones now will be dissolved, recycled by sun and storm. In this stern economy, nothing is wasted. Day by day, the scientists pursue their study of the atoll's volcanic origins, its changing marine biology, the strict limitations the island's harsh environment imposes on the life forms it will sustain. In the improvised laboratory set up in the former French camp, biologist René Taxit shows Cousteau both fresh and saltwater samples. They reveal that though limited in its variety of life forms, the lagoon is far richer in plankton than is the sea. Displaying a lump of dead coral, geologist Bourrouille tells Cousteau that because of the abrupt transition from a saline environment, the lagoon provides a unique opportunity to study the impact of fresh water on the once thriving coral reef. Visible from the air as a dark stain in the lagoon is the deep hole, possibly the vent of a submerged volcano. which long has aroused the particular curiosity of many of the scientists. Cousteau crosses the lagoon to the diving platform placed directly above the sunken crater of the volcano. There, with Delamont and Soumillon, he prepares for an exploratory descent into the vent itself. For the dive, Cousteau has brought special equipment. Anticipating difficult conditions in the lagoon, he has developed a rectangular cone filled with clear water and fixed ahead of the camera lens to permit filming in disturbed or murky conditions below the surface. In the dive itself, Cousteau and Jacques Delcouter and Bernard Delamont have put aside their regular diving suits. Instead, each now wears a watertight unisuit and protective mask. Finally, all preparations complete, Bernard enters the water. Delcouter and Cousteau quickly follow.
The journey begins. Above us, for an instant, hangs a rectangle of sunlight, the window through which we have slipped from one element to another. Then it is gone. I test my camera and the cone shielding the lens against the murkiness of the surrounding water. An apparition looms into view, and I think I recognize Bernard. He signals, and a moment later the lights reveal the inner wall of the crater covered by vegetation. At this level, we still are in a zone of life. Slowly, we continue our descent along the weighted cable, our single reference point as we move into the increasing darkness. Gradually, the character of the water around us seems to be changing, both in temperature and chemical composition, giving it a glycerin-like appearance. Then, at 60 feet, the lights reveal what appears to be the bottom. Instead, it proves to be a dense 4-foot layer of accumulated plant detritus, a thickly matted net in which material falling from the surface is quickly trapped. Through it, Delcouter vanishes, and for a moment all we can see are the air bubbles rising from his breathing apparatus. Then we too pass through the floating layer. Around us, great blobs of matter float by, strange constellations, drifting through a space in which all familiar landmarks have ceased to exist. We seem to have entered a world of dream, ghostly and insubstantial, in which the cable has become the only thread connecting us to reality. Out of the depths, an outcrop appears. From it, our slightest movement lifts little storms of settled particles, the dead chaff of once living matter. Deeper. In this submerged desolation, the water temperature again seems to rise, burning our hands in spite of our gloves. We take samples, hoping later to learn what chemical changes have occurred at successive levels. Now, at nearly 100 feet, we pass through a second suspended layer, enter a silent chaos in which masses of ruptured material move around us, more sensed than seen. Slowly we are enveloped in total darkness. It is only with our flippers that we finally feel the bottom. Earlier, our hands seemed scalded by the water. Now, despite our watertight suits and masks, our eyes are burning. Tears pour down our faces, blurring our vision. The pain is unbearable. I signal our return. I know now that it is not heat that is burning us. It is hydrogen sulfide, the toxic product of vegetation rotting when all oxygen has been consumed. We have penetrated a zone of death, a region where no living thing can long survive. Blinded and burned, we begin an ascent that seems endless. Eager to hurry, to escape this hostile inferno, we still must obey the diver's discipline, return to the surface at a carefully prescribed pace. Slowly, hand over hand along the cable, we rise through the successive layers toward clearer water at the top. A glow of light at last appears from the platform's rectangular well. It is no longer simply a window in the sky. It is deliverance.
As they reach the surface, Delcouter urgently splashes his face to wash away the chemical, but it is Delamotte who has suffered most. More of the hydrogen sulfide has seeped into his mask, and now he cannot open his eyes. As Cousteau removes his mask and unshackles his air cylinders, he too is in distress. Yet despite the severe discomfort the divers have experienced in their descent to the bottom of the vent, Cousteau reports that the dive was well worth the effort. Souvenir of their journey, a piece of dead coral has been brought from the bottom for scientific examination. Later, cleansed of the burning liquid, Cousteau and his companions describe their uncontrolled tears as the sulfide invaded their masks. Even the air tanks have changed from yellow to olive green. Yet above the hostile depths, the crabs thrive and multiply. Here they leave their spawn, feed on algae, absorb essential moisture through hair on legs and body. With nightfall, the roving birds return to Earth, seek the quiet of the nest. But the crabs awake. Now a monstrous crawling army searches the darkened island for food. Yet, like other species, the crab seems doomed never to win more than a temporary victory, to remain a mechanism in some changing design it cannot conceive. For Ramon Arnaud, son of the former garrison commander, the design has offered an unexpected journey. Bidding goodbye to his daughter and wife in Manzanillo, He prepares to return to the island he has not seen in more than 6 decades. In brief hours, Ramon crosses the distance that once seemed hopelessly impassable, but which in memory he has crossed 1,000 times.
Attention au chapeau, il va s'envoler. Ouais.
Ya, bueno, aquí está.
Venez. Attention, hein.
Vale.
Buenos días.
Bueno.
Bonjour Bernard. Dans le
¿Usted sabe
Ramon.
dónde está?
Sí,
¿Sí?
la
¿Dónde?
isla Clipperton.
Ah,
Gracias.
C'est Don
Sí, sí,
Ramon.
en mi tierra. Oh.
My earth, says Ramon. Around him spreads the circle of land where he was born. The boobies remain, the surf, the great rock, and yet something eludes him.
Attendez, venez voir. Vous voyez les cocotiers,
El
hein?
cocotier donde están los...
Quand il y était, il y en avait deux.
¿Ah?
Now with Cousteau, Ramon moves again through the coconut grove that once saved himself and 10 other survivors from death by scurvy.
Ahí teníamos toda la colonia.
Emerging from the trees, Ramon again tries vainly to get his bearings, to find his way back to the reality that was. For a moment, the past seems an illusion. He seeks a familiar structure or landmark, something, but they are gone. The familiar houses of his boyhood, the strong, erect figure of his mother, the boy he was, now a distant stranger.
Donde está grande las olas altas.
Do you remember your father?
Mi padre. Poco.
To Cousteau's question, Ramon says he remembers little, only that he was big and tall with a Kaiser mustache and a helmet with a big eagle, that he dressed in the German or Austrian style.
Alemán o austriaco.
Part of Ramon's earliest memories is the great threatening surf, forever associated with his father. For a little while, he searches the beach, trying to remember the moment in 1915 when his life and the life of all the others on the island was changed forever.
Mi padre murió para allá, a donde se ve dorado.
My father died over there, where the ship was passing. He and the other 3 men, they all died there.
Ahí estaba esperando mi padre que le dieran de comer.
We lived in the little house. My father had just finished his meal, and my sister was outside playing. Then she ran in and told him, "Papa, Papa, a ship." And then he ran out and saw it.
Salió y vio para afuera y dice sí, y entonces comenzó a gritarle, Cardona.
He began to yell, "Cardona, Ira, Rodriguez, a ship, let's go." They took the little boat, the ship's boat, and went. Standing near the high flag, my mother was watching with the telescope. The ship didn't carry a flag. She watched and watched and watched. The little boat went back and forth in the waves until I think the men could not control it, or the oars broke. My mother started to tell us, to cry. It was a tragedy, big emotions. We were all crying. Within hours, a great storm broke over the island, inundating much of its narrow strip under mountainous seas. Now bereft of every able-bodied man but one, Alvarez, the lighthouse keeper, Madame Arnaud and 9 surviving women and children huddled under the floor of her house, fearful the winds would sweep it away. Then, as the storm passed, Madame Arnaud gave birth to a son, her 4th and last child. Stunned, the little band began its 2-year struggle to survive. But now from the rock, a new and unexpected terror began. Gathering all the guns, the lighthouse keepers seized rule over the survivors, brutally demanded the services of the women, raping and shooting a mother and daughter who refused him. Declaring no woman would leave the island alive, Alvarez counted his potential victims. Tirza, who submitted but promised to kill him. 13-year-old Rosalia. Altagracia, first of his victims. Madame Alicia Arnaud, his last intended mistress. It was in mid-July of 1917, says Ramon, when the lighthouse keeper came to the big house and said to Madame Arnaud, "You are going to live with me." But the mother made no reply because Alvarez was armed. It was then that Tirza said, "Now is the time." Dawn of July 18, 1917, was little different from other mornings. Already the birds were beginning to hunt. Soon the heat of the day would come. At 11 o'clock, Madame Arnaud and Tirza, with young Ramon, started the walk to the keeper's house. Ramon tells Cousteau what happened. Here was the first house, the other house here. Alvarez was sitting in the doorway on one side, and we were on this side. My mother here. Tirza stood near the edge of the window that faced that way. She moved away from the window, but when she reached Alvarez, he lifted his head and said to her, "What are you doing here? Go do your things." Tirza went then to the corner by the trunk. She had left the hammer there, and she went back to get it. My mother told her to go ahead. Tirza struck, like this, with the hammer again. He fell. My mother shoved me away. I started to go inside, and then again he was standing. He took an axe and went at my mother. My mother grabbed him and held on. My mother shouted for me to go to the other side and bring a can of petrol to burn Alvarez.
Yes. Yo salí corriendo aquí.
I began to run, but when I got over there, I saw the ship,
Yorktown.
the Yorktown.
Me vine así, pero no aguanté.
I came back, and Tirza asked me what was going on. I told her, a ship, a ship.
Le dije, barco, barco. Entonces,
What will happen? What will happen? Sent to check for enemy Germans, the astonished Yorktown crew instead found women who had just killed a man, stranded children in ragged sailcloth sacks to whom privation and hunger seemed utterly normal. 11 survivors of a prolonged human catastrophe. Now their ordeal and Ramon's early boyhood were finished. Today, the events of that boyhood are part of vanishing history, little remembered by any but 2 aging survivors, Ramon and his one-time nursemaid, Altagracia. Yet now, before he returns from his visit to the past, Ramon Arnaud leaves one memento, one symbol of peace for the father he so briefly knew.
A cross stands in the sunlit silence, brief token that man was here. In a last tour of the island, Erto and I encounter other rusted evidence of man's brief, ill-fated intrusions. In this stern, minute world, only the crabs and a few bird species thrive. Here, other creatures, including man, have little place. Yet, by a harsh irony, man himself is steadily reducing the diversity of life on his planet. He is creating a world hostile to all but the hardiest species, a world hostile even to himself. Another Clipperton. Yet to this bleak outpost, waves have brought a ball no child will play with.
Bonne qualité, hein? Alors, trésor ramassé en 5 minutes.
Nearby we come upon other artifacts that on this alien shore seem at once familiar and puzzling. A little boat. A toy soldier. Dismembered dolls. The bits and pieces of human existence. Even unspent ammunition, salvaged from a wreck and then abandoned. In this cosmic theater of the absurd, perhaps it is the crab that may survive, not we. In this rigorous testing ground, he has had no choice but to strive or die. He is unencumbered by thought, or compassion, or love, or hate. He has no myth, sings no songs, and never plays with dolls.